Hello and welcome to The Exchange, a financial gleaner and JNN Business Forum. I'm Neville Graham. Today we delve into the issue of credit reporting, a simple process which should significantly alter your life. Experts recommend that you keep a tight check on your credit score to ensure that you are never in the red. But the reality is, most people never hear of a credit report until they need to do business with a financial entity. We have an expert panel to explain all there is to know about credit reporting. Beside me, we have Chief of Credit Risk Management at JNN Bank, Keisha Melhado-Forrest. The man sitting in the middle right now is CEO of Creditinfo Jamaica, Craig Stephen, and Managing Director of Paradigm Capital, Gayle Dixon, brings up the sidelines. And you can follow us on the discussion on social media using hashtags The Exchange and FGJNN. Follow us on Twitter at Jamaica Gleaner and at Jamaica News Network. You can also watch us on 1spotmedia.com. Now, before we get into the discussion, here's an overview of how credit reporting works.
When you borrow money, whether through a revolving account like credit cards or an installment account like an auto loan or student loan, this information is gathered by credit bureaus. The data the bureaus have in your credit files is used to calculate your credit scores. Your credit scores are determined by 5 major factors: payment history, your debt usage, the age of your credit accounts, the types of accounts, and the number of inquiries on your credit. These scores are then used to determine your risk factor for future loans. The 3-digit score is a numerical representation that indicates how risky a borrower you are from a lender's perspective. A higher credit score can help to improve the terms and conditions you qualify for. For example, your credit reports and/or scores impact the deals and interest you will receive when you buy a home, finance a car, rent an apartment, apply for a job, buy insurance, purchase a cell phone, or open a new credit card. The best way to have healthy credit is to remain responsible about the credit cards or loans you have.
Now let's dive right into it. Now, Craig, since you're the only man right there, I'll ask you first.
Sure.
Not that we didn't want ladies first, but who really monitors credit scores?
Well, credit scores are monitored by the financial institutions who are using them. Credit bureaus produce those credit scores. And when we produce those credit scores, they are...
And by credit bureaus, you mean just like yourself
Right.
and about 2 others?
Right. Credit bureaus, there's 3 credit bureaus licensed in Jamaica at the moment. Creditinfo Jamaica was the first licensed credit bureau. And then there's CRIF, and there is Credit Information Services, which was the 3rd licensed bureau. So only 3 entities are so privileged to obtain credit information and disseminate through the Credit Reporting Act of 2010. That allows us to, that gives us the authority to compile credit scores using our proprietary scoring models. And
Credit scores on who?
Credit scores
In effect, when
Right.
does that start? I mean, am I a 10-year-old buying a toy in my favorite toy store and credit report starts
Right.
writing on me?
No. Credit report starts from once you have credit history that's shared with the credit bureau. And at the moment, only adults are allowed to borrow. So those above the age of 18 years old, once you'd have borrowed from most of the traditional institutions, that information will be passed to the bureau, and we'd analyze that and produce a score.
So, but what's the system of governance around this, though? Because
Right.
you're all up into my business, aren't you?
We are, but we are regulated by the Central Bank, Bank of Jamaica, in particular the Financial Institution Supervisory Division, or the FISD, which is the same institution that regulates the commercial banking sector. So we are heavily regulated. We do have an ultimate responsibility to the industry and to our stakeholders, the individuals in Jamaica, and we take that very seriously. We operate in 33 countries across the world, so we do bring our international experience in terms of security protocols and how to safeguard the information of Jamaican
That
citizens.
makes you feel safe, Keisha, because you'll be looking in people's business, knowing just who you're going to be lending money to.
Correct.
How does that work?
In terms of how it is
Yes.
fine. Okay, so once someone is applying for credit at Jamaica National, regardless of the type of credit, we usually require that a credit report be produced. We started using credit reports from the local bureaus about 3 or 4 years ago, and we look not so much at the score, but at the details of the report, the actual details of the loans and how they have been serviced. And
That's interesting. You mean you have the whole history of the loan before you?
pretty much, certainly
Or
for the
payment details
payment
of every
details, balances.
card payment, that sort of thing?
Yes, for at least, well, there's 7 years worth of history on the report, and about 2 years worth of payments, I believe, that you can see on the report. Now, what's great about that is prior to credit reporting, we would first of all have to rely on the disclosures of the borrower regarding any debts that they had. So if the debt wasn't with our institution, we might not be aware of its existence. That's one.
And that's where I want to bring in Gayle, because her organization prides itself in having shifted the paradigm. Yes, it ain't your name, Paradigm Capital, in terms of how you lend to people. And essentially, you wouldn't be relying on credit scores, would you?
Not entirely, because it's just it's a guide. So when we get the information from the credit bureau, it's comprehensive. So what we're able to do, as Keisha was speaking to, is the fact that we look at how the customer is actually repaying the loan. So it's not that we're going to look at it and say the credit score is low and we're going to decline the loan. We look at how they're actually servicing the loan. Obviously, if the credit score is higher, they may be able to be offered a better interest rate. But we take all of that into consideration before saying yes or no.
And how long do you take?
Or
In other words, does the presence of the credit score assist you more greatly in terms of making a decision, faster turnaround?
Absolutely, because you're able to gather the credit report instantaneously. Our process for Paradigm is entirely online, so once we receive the application, we do the credit reports, maybe 15 minutes, and we're able to make an initial assessment. Based on looking at the information, we may require additional information from the applicant because there's something that is inconclusive on the report.
But you have to get my permission to do all of that, don't
Absolutely. So the applicant would first have to sign the authorization for us to be able to pull that person's report. After so doing, then we're able to make an assessment in terms of affordability. And if there's additional information we may need, we reach back out to the client for them to explain something. And this is a good opportunity for the applicant as well, because if there's something derogatory on your credit report, you now have the opportunity to go back to the bureau and investigate it if you have a dispute.
Yeah, I might have a few disputes with Craig because, I mean, there may be a few bar bills I haven't paid in my life. So does that affect it?
Bar bills? No, I don't think so. But your repayment history on your traditional credit facilities, yes, it will affect you. It's very important to repay your loans on time, hopefully before time. All those things benefit you. And importantly, with your credit cards, make sure you make that monthly payment, that minimum monthly payment.
At least.
At least, because that's what helps to keep you current.
What then would be either the look or the feel of a good credit score?
I would say the credit scores that we use at Creditinfo Jamaica, we adopted the FICO scale, which runs from 200, 250, they're up to about 900, 850 to 900. And that's because we understood how closer we were to the American market, North American market, and we would be more familiar with that type of scaling. The European market uses that different scale. They go from about 0 to 500, so the number interpretation is slightly different. But with respect to the ones that we are more familiar with, which is the North American scale, which runs from 250 to 900, anything above 600 it would be considered a good score.
What would that be telling you, Keisha?
Well, first of all, it does speak to the person's borrowing character, that you can rely on them to service debt as committed. There is, however, a point at which even the best debtor could become over-indebted, and so you can't look at a credit report by itself.
You call it over-leveraged, I think.
Correct.
Yes.
You can't look at a credit score or credit report by itself. You're still looking at the person's ability to repay or the ability to take on new debt as well.
Are there any percentages that you take into consideration? For example, could a person be too heavily leveraged at, say, 80%?
Yes, they could be, but again, we don't look at that alone, because you could have we call it a total debt service ratio. You could have a total debt service ratio of 80%. However, your residual income is more than sufficient to service the debt, and so we're not constrained too much by things like that. Once it is established or demonstrated that you should be able to service the debt, and your credit history suggests that you have the willingness to service the debt.
Well, I tell you, one constraint we have right now is a break. And this is The Exchange, a financial gleaner and JNN Business Forum. The conversation continues on the next side of the break. Please stay with us. Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us. This is The Exchange, a financial gleaner and JNN Business Forum. If you're just joining us, we're discussing credit reporting in Jamaica. Remember, you can join the conversation on social media by tweeting us at hashtags The Exchange and FGJNN. Follow us on Facebook at Jamaica Gleaner and at Jamaica News Network. You can also watch us on 1spotmedia.com. Before we get back to the discussion, let's take a look at some of the most read stories in the Financial Gleaner last month.
Wayne Chen to fight to hold place on his NCB shares. Third-generation hotelier Pike takes on the R Hotel. Davina Bennett sets up modeling agency in Paris. Armstrong out as Sagicor reshuffles managers. Terra Nova to roll out high-rise condos. New owner Norbrook to develop Express Fitness into regional brand. Solar Partners set up offices in Kingston. NCB faces yet another hurdle in Guardian takeover bid. Incomplete Port Royal Cruise Port secures first ship call. Shorebell Johnson going after bigger markets, more profit for Sagicor Bank.
Now remember, you can pick up your copy of the Financial Gleaner every Friday at a store or a Gleaner vendor near you, or log on to JamaicaGleaner.com for the latest financial stories of the day in the business section. Continuing the discussion, there are instances where individuals miss a loan payment, and this is where we start quarreling with Craig. I mean,
Yes,
how dare you give me a credit score of 250 when I well know that I'm more worth 750?
Yes, those perceptions can be out there, but just to remind the public that the credit bureau is only a medium for information exchange. We don't create information, and therefore all your credit history is really housed within the financial institutions, the one who you access the credit from, and the ones who you are repaying on a monthly basis. They're the ones who report to us, and all we do is report back what was reported to us. So your history is really controlled by you, the individual, and all we do is provide a report of that history. So we are unable to say that you have made a payment on time if you have not done so.
You know, I want to talk a little bit about the sort of discipline that Jamaicans need to have credit scores and looking at these things. But just before we do that, Craig, sure. I need you to tell me a little bit about your interaction with the Bank of Jamaica.
Right. Well, they are our regulators, of course. So there's the Supervising Authority for the Credit Reporting Act of 2010, and they are the ones who would regulate us on a annual basis. They require regular reporting.
And what, that would be monthly or quarterly?
We have quarterly reporting and annual reporting, and we also have operational audits and all types of things that we have to undertake to satisfy the regulations as it stands. So we are treated almost like a commercial bank, even though we're not handling physical cash or deposits because of we perceive the importance of information and persons' information. We're in a unique position as a bureau where we, from the inception of the bureau, we're allowed to collect data on over 1 million Jamaican citizens. And we're allowed to do so by a mere notice in the newspaper, 7 clear days from which we receive that information. So once a financial institution advises the public that they wish to share their information, they're eligible by law to do so. However, once that information gets to us, now we have a database of 1 million people who we have never really met, never done business with, but we have to secure them.
But you have a life outside of this place,
yes,
with like me. I mean, bird bush and fishing and all of that. But
yes,
that doesn't affect my credit score in terms of how you handle the information?
No.
Come on, we're friends.
No. Unfortunately, the protocols are set up in a way where I don't have that level of control. We do have system-to-system integration with a number of our institutions, so we don't have humans involved in manipulating data. All of that is done by a system-to-system exchange of information, and it's much more secure, and a lot more institutions are going into automated pulling of the credit reports and sharing of information, which helps to reduce or improve the security of that information exchange when everything is done via machines.
Speaking about security, Keisha, you'd be relying on that security to a great extent, won't you?
The security in terms of well, certainly for our customers, when we share data with the bureaus, it is our expectation that the bureaus will safeguard their information, because even though a breach might not occur at a Jamaica national, if it occurs on the side of the bureaus, then we potentially have a problem.
What kind of problem?
Well, first of all, confidential information is now in the hands of probably unscrupulous persons who now also have access to personal information, TRNs, dates of birth, information that could potentially allow someone to commit identity theft, things like that. Or even just the credit information itself could be a proxy for your wealth, and you could be targeted as an individual. So for us, it's extremely important that our customers' data is protected wherever it is.
Gayle, the need for a paradigm shift. I keep doing that. But anyway, the need for a paradigm shift in terms of how we approach finances in Jamaica was seen by your organization. And indeed, you reacted to that in terms of the requests from locals for a different approach. How have you been able to do that in a better way with credit reporting happening now?
Sharing the information, and one of the things that we'll be discussing is financial inclusion, and for me, financial inclusion means transparency. And what we do at Paradigm is to ensure that we're putting all the information in front of the client so that they're able to make better informed decisions. What we recognize, and I'm glad that you continue to say paradigm shift, is that the mindset had to shift. So in order for individuals to borrow better, they had to have the knowledge to borrow better. And if you were not putting it in front of them, they're not going to know what to do. And so we put information in front of them daily by way of social media. When they submit an application to us and we do an assessment, we use a 40% debt service ratio as well. And we put the information in front of them so they recognize what it's going to cost them for 1 month, 6 months, however long they decide to take the loan. And what we found is that when they have the information in front of them, they're making different decisions. So the borrower that would keep a loan for $100,000 for a year is now inclined to take it for 6 months, because they recognize that the longer they keep the loan, the more they're paying back in interest. So we're shifting the way people look at borrowing.
How have people been managing their credit, Keisha? What with the existence of credit reports now and the wide choice in terms of institutions that they can go to?
Well, borrowers have become more vigilant in the servicing of their debt obligations. That's what we have found. So the moment they attempt to access credit and they see that their history, whether it is legitimate history or an error on the report, because sometimes that happens, is potentially compromising their ability to access the credit, they'll take immediate steps to have that resolved. Okay? So if it is a payment history issue, they will try to deal with that. It might take a little time for it to to update the report and influence the score. But they have been doing that.
What's the process of challenging these reports?
Well, normally they would raise a dispute with the bureaus and specifying specifically what it is on the report that they're querying or disputing. And the bureaus would then get in touch with the lender. The lender is required to do an investigation. And all of this is required by law too. So the lender is required to do an investigation. And if it is determined that an error has been made by the bank, then we are required to correct the error, notify the customer in writing, the bureau in writing, and also the Bank of Jamaica. So we do have that obligation as well.
That sounds like I have to pay some money up front, though, Craig, to have that remedied.
No. That's a process that is allowed for under law. It's your right as a consumer to be able to challenge any piece of information, the accuracy thereof, contained in your credit report. And that's why we're able to, we have to give you one free credit report in each calendar year once you apply for it. That's
Sure.
under law, yes.
Yeah, so I can just ring you up tomorrow morning,
You
ask
can.
for my credit score, that's all the thing?
You not ring us up and ask for the credit score due to certain security issues with that. But yes,
Sure.
there is a process to apply for your information, but you are entitled to get a copy of all the information we have on you once in each calendar year. And we encourage
you
citizens.
can't get away with that, Craig. You need to tell me, how do I go about getting my credit score?
Right. That's how you.
Once a year?
Yeah. Once
Talk
a
to me.
year.
Yeah.
All you do is make contact with us at creditinfojamaica.com. You can call us at 633-7023, and we will surely give you the information that you need to apply for your credit report, which
See,
is
I
really.
didn't charge you for that ad.
No, you didn't. But it's only, all you need is 2 forms of government issued ID.
Sure.
And you fill out the application form and send to your email address.
And will that affect my credit
No.
score at all?
No, that inquiry will not affect you, but regular credit checks on your credit report by a financial institution will affect you. It can affect you negatively if there's too many inquiries in a very short period of time.
Why?
Well, inquiries have been found from empirical evidence to have correlation with risk.
So is it that there's a sort of algorithm within your system that says, no, look, hold on. Keisha is asking too many questions about this guy. Red flag.
Yes, there would be, our scorecard has a number of variables that we look at in analyzing your history. And one of those variables is how many persons have inquired on you within a period of time. Also, the reason that they have inquired on you. And once certain factors line up, if there's more than a certain amount of inquiries done within a particular time period, you will lose points on your score. But the relative ratio to your score with everything else that affects your score
Sure.
is very low. So it may contribute maybe 3% towards your score calculation.
This is, Keisha, talking about the phenomenon in banking that they call double dipping, right? You're trying to prevent that, aren't you? Out with it. If, say, I go to Gayle last week
Right.
and say, no, Gayle, I need $100,000.
Right.
Gayle will check my credit score. Good. Yeah. All right. Come back next week. You'll get $100,000. We can have it ready for you at that time. During that same week, the Monday of that same week, I come to you
Right.
and say I need $200,000, and because I got lucky. And while I'm on my way to Gayle, I come to you to get that $200,000. You check my credit score, you see it's good, and you're about to give it. Not true?
True. True. And it's quite possible that by the time we pull the report, the inquiry done by Gayle might not necessarily be reflected on it, depending on the timing. Right? Or is it daily now?
It's currently, it's real time. So if that person would have gone to Gayle initially and did an inquiry and then went to Jane, they would see it in an
Right.
instant,
And-
immediately.
And because we review the reports so carefully, we're not just looking at a score. We would then make an inquiry about the credit that they attempted to take from Gayle.
Very interesting. That's something to ponder during the break. This is The Exchange. We take a break right now. Stay with us as we come back. Welcome back to The Exchange, a financial gleaner and JNN Business Forum. Now, we were pondering just how the credit bureaus and the financial institutions work together in the background to keep people like myself who have a tendency to overborrow honest. And so, have the credit bureaus really, Keisha, helped the financial sector?
Absolutely.
And to what extent?
Well, as I previously said, we have access to far more information about a borrower today, and so we can make more intelligent decisions about how it is we lend. That's one. Two, it has allowed us to introduce, well, we would have done it before, but it has helped to enhance it, risk-based pricing. So those who
That's
are...
something I want to talk about later, risk-based pricing.
Okay.
Because I know there are benefits to it.
Right. Risk-based pricing and also structuring your loan in a particular way to account for the riskiness of a particular borrower. So for those who are determined to be most creditworthy or with the highest credit scores, you can now lend them at more attractive rates of interest, probably longer tenures, higher loan-to-value ratios, but it doesn't mean that you cannot also lend to somebody who is considered high risk. It's just that you have to price it appropriately, price the risk appropriately, probably shorter tenures, lower loan-to-value ratios. So it actually does still allow people who probably thought they might not have been able to access credit to do so.
Gayle, some of the persons who would come to a paradigm would be on the high-risk side or micro-lending side. Wouldn't they?
Not necessarily, because remember, microfinance has been operating in Jamaica space for almost three decades. So these individuals have accessed credit before, so they would have built credit history within the sector. So now having the credit bureaus, as Keisha is speaking to, is absolutely spectacular for us, because when we're able to see the information and able to make the decision, but it's also perfect, and it works for the borrower as well, because now that borrower has the right to request a better rate, and they're able to shop around because they know that rates are declining, rates are going down in the industry, because you have the benefit of the credit bureau, and you're able to make better decisions in terms of aligning your risk with the loans.
So true. I can
Absolutely.
make deals. I really
You
can.
absolutely can, and the onus is really on the borrower to shop around and make decisions for you and for your financial situation. But shop around. That's one of the things that we always encourage customers to do. So whether or not you borrow from Paradigm or anyone else, is the onus is on you as a borrower to shop around and make sure that the loan that you take suits your financial situation.
So I go to big ABC bank and I get and they're giving me a loan based on a credit score of say 750 or 800 for whatever, and good credit history, and they're offering me a loan at say 7.95%. I come to you. Could I get a better rate?
If your credit report is there and all the information that is in your credit report speaks to you being a creditworthy borrower, then absolutely, because this is a client that we want. So if you come to us and your credit score is 900 and we recognize that based on a report, there's all indication that you'll repay this loan, obviously we want you, so we're going to reduce our rates to accommodate you.
But at the same time, Craig, we have to be careful that in the shopping around, because although the Bank of Jamaica says we should shop around, checking the credit score too much can affect the credit rating, n'est-ce pas?
Yes, it can. But the common misperception is that shopping around means actually putting through an application for a loan. You're able to get information without actually applying for a credit facility. Now, when an inquiry hits a credit report, it's when you'd have actually decided that you're going to go ahead and apply for this loan. You've filled out documentation, you've provided it to them, and they've engaged in this process to look to assess you, whether they're going to lend you yes or no. Once you've reached that advanced stage, yes, an inquiry will be recorded on your credit report.
No, but hold on. Don't you remember that you would need that credit score, say, at some point, to determine the credit worthiness?
Yes, they would.
You're suggesting to me that I would have had to engage in order to get that credit score?
No, I'm suggesting that there is ways to get information when you're shopping around about the value of a particular facility or service that a company is offering without actually entering into a formal arrangement with them, which would allow for the inquiry to be done.
Well, I tell you, one arrangement we have right now, we have an arrangement with our audience. They have questions and they always want to talk to us. Your question, sir?
Okay, hello.
Hi.
I consider myself a youth. I think legally I'm a youth, right? I think I'm fortunate throughout my life, whether through parental support or scholarships, grants, whatever it is, I've been able to accomplish and get everything that I've wanted to access without having to establish a line of credit. I'm only 20, and I think you're only allowed to have a credit score after 18, right? So considering that I've had such a good run without credit, is there any real practical consequence to me completely avoiding credit up until the point where I mean, it's a critical need, like, for example, when I need a mortgage, maybe when I'm 25 or 26?
Yes, you will need to manage and monitor your credit history and the performance thereof in order to be able to access those type of more complex loans that you want in the future. You have been very fortunate to have that family support, but not everybody is that fortunate, and the vast majority of persons will have to demonstrate themselves what their creditworthiness is in order for them to benefit from this financial system. So, and I would tell you that what you should do is use that prudence that you've started with to continue to start to apply for things in your own name so that you can start to build your own history, because you're the one that is ultimately going to benefit from it in the long run.
And that's very important. Tell me something. You just spoke, Craig, about the importance of building a history based on activities, so on, and right. that speaks to information. Keisha, they spoke about the Data Protection Act the other day. Don't you foresee some problems there in terms of access to information, use of information, sharing of information?
Well, in terms of what aspect specifically?
Well,
right? No.
In terms of the operation of credit bureaus and sharing of information between banks and so on.
Well, I imagine that between the Credit Reporting Act and any data protection legislation, those will have to be harmonized to ensure that the credit reporting mechanism is still able to function as intended. Otherwise, the integrity of the system is completely compromised. So I'm not particularly worried about that at this stage.
Not worried, Gayle?
Either. You need to speak to this young man here. In as much as you've not used credit, that doesn't stop you, and it shouldn't stop you from checking your credit report, because you may have someone that has been unscrupulous and borrowing repetitively and need a clean slate. And the fact that you have no credit history could be the clean slate. So it's to take up the credit bureau on their offer of a free credit report each year to make sure there's not information on your credit report, particularly because you're not using it.
Well, sure.
The same discussion. It's not that without credit history you can't access credit. It's just that you might not be able to access it at the most favorable terms. That's one. Two, as our credit reporting becomes more sophisticated, what you'll find is that you might actually need a credit history to be able to avail yourselves of other types of services. So, for example, in the United States, to be able to rent property, you have to have a credit history, or to be able to get a good cell phone plan, you have credit history. So it's not only about loans, and I suspect that we will eventually get there too. Because, I mean, yes, credit reporting is new to us, but we're evolving and we're growing and we're trying to, be more first world where that is concerned. But it will not hurt your ability to access credit today.
Gayle, any unease with this new data protection?
No,
law
absolutely
coming
not.
into-
You want the customer to feel safe in that they're sharing the information, that we're using it properly. Keisha just spoke to the fact that even to get a good credit cell phone, that's moved into Jamaica.
Right.
Because even the utility companies are now using your credit score to determine what your deposit will be. So I think for basic living, your credit report is going to impact you So you can't escape it. We're not living in that time
Right.
anymore.
Sounds like we're looking somewhere into the future now, Craig, because one would want to ask, what's next for credit reporting? Where is it going?
Right.
after this?
Well,
But, let me tell you why I asked that.
Sure.
I need to know from you, for example, apart from Students Loan Bureau, apart from some of the hire purchase agencies, apart from the utility bills, where else is sharing my information?
well, the credit unions, the commercial banks, microfinance entities, hire purchase companies, utilities companies have started to share information as well. And there is a sector that is pretty much untouched, which is our trade creditor sector, which you're going to find that if we don't have a major impact on that sector, it's going to be difficult for us to reach the levels that the United States have reached. And I'll explain what I mean by that. When you go to the United States, all credit is not necessarily accessed through a bank.
Right.
Meaning everything you want to acquire in America, you don't go to a bank to borrow the money and then go and acquire the item. There's many places where you can go and get the item directly from that seller, and that seller will offer the credit directly, and those are called trade creditors. And what that does is ease the burden on the banking sector to have to provide that physical cash. It expands lending because lending is done by more institutions, and of course some of those institutions will take slightly more risk than a bank would take in offering their goods on credit. And what you're going to find is, if we don't have those type of institutions sharing, participating in the system, it's going to be difficult for us to reach those credit levels like United States, who is probably now at 120% of GDP in terms of
Credit.
Their credit.
You
Yeah.
spoke about the U.S. model in terms of how we rate somewhere between 250 and 900. The European model, where we use somewhere between 25 and 500.
Right.
I'd like to talk about the Chinese model, where they've introduced this. You laugh. I see Gayle know what I'm talking about. Where they've introduced what is called a social credit score.
Yes.
And it's so tight that you can't even leave the country if you have a bad credit rating.
Well, that is the evolution of credit reporting, credit bureaus. And what you'd find is credit bureaus aren't just merely institutions who collect information and disseminate, but we have vast experience in analytics and statistics. We hold vast amount of data, and we're able to do a lot of things. And one of those things is our company itself. We are big into big data, and we are into the social
So-called
media
metadata.
Yes, we're into the social media profiling as well. We do this in
I
other
wonder how many
markets.
terabytes of information you have on people. 1 million strong?
Yes,
The
1 million
electoral
strong.
office had as much as 6 terabytes to hold the data, the voters list. You should be having
We have
pretty
way
near that.
more than 6 terabytes, I'll tell you that, because we have to have backup and redundancies and so forth. But
Right. Sure.
we have a vast database. It's growing. But the credit reporting system is, I consider it to be an ecosystem, because it's not something that we can operate on our own as a bureau. It requires the participation, the partnerships of the data providers, the consumers who are taking the credit, us, the regulators. Everybody has to come together in order to help us to help them to reduce asymmetric information out there, because really that's what a bureau is there for. We're trying to ensure that both sides of the transaction have all the information possible to make that
And
best
keeping
decision.
everybody honest.
Yes.
Gayle, the matter of credit bureaus and their existence must be helping your business in terms of the decision making. But how sanguine are you that everybody is cooperating for a better credit rating system?
You know, I think Craig could speak to that because it's kind of tricky because everyone doesn't, especially all the companies are not feeding into the credit bureaus presently. And because we have 3 credit bureaus, that doesn't mean that a Paradigm or a JN is using all bureaus. And so there's a disadvantage in the market space right now. So if we're not using, I think you spoke to that earlier, Craig, as well, is that we're not getting all the information. Everyone is not feeding information into the credit bureaus. One of the challenges that some operators have is that if we are pulling from all bureaus, the cost to do so becomes cumbersome. Because now if we're using Creditinfo, CRIF, or CIS, and you're using them collectively, that means you're getting hit with that cost 3 times. How do you manage that without transferring all the costs back to your client? And keep in mind also that microfinance particularly meets the need of that market that is borrowing $20,000. So if the cost to run a credit report, let's say, is $800 times 3, and they're only borrowing $20,000, how do you justify charging the client that 3 times? So it's weighing it because there is a direct disadvantage because everyone is not feeding information into the bureau.
Well, I tell you something I have to justify right now, staying on here too long, because this is where we take our final break. This is the Exchange, a financial gleaner, and JNN Business Forum. When we come back, we'll wrap things up. Welcome back to The Exchange, a financial gleaner and JNN Business Forum. Thanks for staying with us as this episode comes to a close. I'd like to ask our panelists to give us their final marks on today's topic. Keisha?
Okay. Jamaica National has always been about empowering Jamaicans and ensuring...
You had to get that one in about Jamaica National.
Absolutely. That is why we're here.
We're going to charge you for that ad, you know.
No, we're trying to improve the financial outcome for all Jamaicans.
Sure.
And so we want to really implore them to borrow responsibly. Borrow responsibly. If we had more time, I'd want to speak about things like how it is you build credit and build it well, how it is you go about repairing your credit, taking into consideration the fact that credit sometimes distorts your perception of value. So oftentimes, particularly with revolving credit, you're willing to pay more for an item that you're purchasing on credit than you would if you were buying it cash. The discipline around that, you know, in terms of if I'm not willing to pay more than X for it, if I had to take the money out of my pocket now, I shouldn't be willing to pay more for it on credit.
True.
That's one. 2, not using credit to supplement your income. So again,
So don't use credit.
don't use credit.
Don't use capital acquisition to finance recurrent expenditure.
Do not
That's how
use
them
revolving credit,
Yes.
in particular, to supplement your income, because it's a recipe for not so nice things, and you'll find that you'll end up having to earn your way out of debt, and it's not a productive use of your effort. And finally, and I just really wanted to get this
Sure.
bit in. Credit also, if you're not careful, it blurs the line between wants and needs. And I'm mentioning revolving credit in particular because that is where we seem to have a lot of issues. That's where people tend to really get a little carried away and they have a difficulty recovering. Yes, a Jamaica National is here to help to consolidate debts that you might have out there, you know, to improve your cash flow, that kind of thing, and to eventually journey with you in achieving those other milestones. Home ownership, leveraging the equity in your home over time to be able to finance your second degree, or to pay for medical expenses, or to buy your mother a home. So all of these things, we really want you to be on the right path where your credit is concerned, so that you can really unlock the potential of the assets you acquire with credit in the future.
Gayle, you sounded a note of optimism when you spoke to a new discipline coming to some of the persons who walk through your doors, that paradigm.
Yeah, that was the foundation on which paradigm was built. One of the things that we say to our clients that we put on social media every day is to pay attention, assess, review before you commit. And one of the things that we always say, and we go out and we engage employers to speak to their employees about responsible borrowing, is to always allow your afford to supersede a lender's up to. Because oftentimes we see these big glamorous ads that you could borrow up to $1.5 million, and they could fit it into your salary, and so you see the individuals gravitating towards it. That's why we spoke earlier about the appetite changing and how paradigm was trying to change that dynamic. But your affordability should always supersede what your lender is lending you. So assess first, review, before you commit. Shop around, the onus is on you.
And Craig, you would want to be telling persons out there that even though they've never borrowed in their life, even though they've never created a bill in their life, they should be concerned about their credit score.
They should, and what they should, we encourage them to come and seek the information, because the Credit Bureau, Creditinfo Jamaica, is here. We're a whole host of knowledge, wealth of knowledge, and we're here to support our consumers, not just to provide them with a credit report, but to educate them on its best practices and uses and how to manage and maintain a credit. And we encourage each and every Jamaican citizen to apply for a copy of that credit report, because some people, they don't know what a loan is, and sometimes they believe that a credit card isn't a loan. And they would say, but I don't have any loans. I say, do you have a credit card? And they say, yes. And I say, well, you have a credit history, you have a loan. So
a high price loan,
right,
at 49%.
it is, but they need to start to acquire the information, get the information, and once they have the information, they're now armed, they're now empowered to use that information and maintain their history in a way that they can always show the best of themselves through the credit reporting regime.
You know, Keisha, I begged for you a while ago in terms of getting that last word in about building the credit history, that discipline necessary.
Yes, absolutely. And you can actually start exercising that discipline before you have taken on the credit. So things like contractual savings arrangements, setting goals and saving consistently towards them. It's the same kind of discipline you will need to service a loan on an installment basis going forward. Starting out probably with a credit facility with a low limit that you can manage, that you can try to pay more than the minimum payment, or try to pay off the balance each month. That's the kind of habit you want to develop. Also, you want to look at where is it that you really want to spend your money, where credit is concerned. Do you want to devote 50% of your income to credit card debt and unsecured loans that probably offering you no real value, because you might have spent it on consumables or whatever it is? Or do you want to be spending 30% on a mortgage?
Some people take loans for ATI.
Yes, they do.
But not all institutions lend it to them for that purpose.
No, it's a dynamic of our culture.
Yeah,
It's a dynamic.
Gayle, you know, Keisha, I keep cutting you off, but Gayle, I need to ask, how do you repair a bad credit score?
Is to look at where you are, get access to your credit report, make sure that there's no discrepancy on it, know what your financial goal is, and put it on a piece of paper.
No, man, I'm talking about
repairing.
You've accessed it,
right?
And you look at it, and it's bad.
Yeah,
how do you go about
that's what I'm talking
repairing?
about.
Yeah.
So you get your credit report, because the reality is if it's bad, it's already hit the credit report. So now people know. So you get the free credit report from all the bureaus. You look at where you are. You put your financial goal on paper, because you say you want to pay off your debt. So before you commit to
The same discipline that Keisha was talking about a while ago.
So before I contact one of my creditors and say I promise to pay X, Y, and Z, you need to first make a budget for yourself, because you still have to survive, and you have to know what your income is to say, okay, I can allocate this to that. And then one of the important things is to look at the loan with the highest interest and the greatest penalties, because you may want to address that first, and then you make contact with the creditor and say, okay, I want to work on this, how do I do so? And then you have serious, clear conversation with them and say, this is what I can afford, because most lenders, they want the money back. So rather than avoiding them, try to make the situation work, so you'll find that little by little you're paying it off rather than ignoring it, because it's going to, you spoke of China, so it's going to catch you.
Don't ignore your credit score. That's where we have to leave it on this episode of The Exchange. Thank you to our panel, Chief of Credit Risk Management at JN Bank, Keisha Melhado-Forrest, CEO of Creditinfo, Craig Stephen, and Managing Director of Paradigm Capital, Gayle Dixon. And of course, a big thanks to our viewers and our social media followers. We encourage you to keep the conversation going by using the hashtags The Exchange and FGJNN. Follow us on Facebook at Jamaica Gleaner and at Jamaican News Network. You can also watch this episode and others on 1spotmedia.com. On behalf of the entire production team, thanks for watching. I'm Neville Graham. Pleasant viewing.